is TrueNorthTV, powered by Communitech. From Waterloo region, Ontario, Canada, to the world. The conversations you need and want to hear with interesting people on topics at the intersection of technology and humanity. Tech for good. Let's get started.
Thanks, Talia. Hello and welcome to TrueNorthTV. I'm Iain Klugman and I'm your host. My guest on TrueNorthTV today is Bridgit CEO and co-founder Mallorie Brodie. She is the recipient of numerous entrepreneurial awards and honors, and a couple of weeks ago, Bridget was once again named to the Globe and Mail's list of Canada's top 400 growing companies. Mallorie Brodie, welcome to TrueNorthTV.
Thanks so much for having me today.
It's great to have you. It's great to see you. It's been a while since we've seen one another. At one point, we spent an entire week together. I can't remember exactly why, but we were back and forth to Toronto and a bunch of events that we did together. And I think that was really, I knew Lauren before then, but that was really an opportunity to get to know you better and to learn a lot more about Bridget. So let's go back to, how did you come to start Bridget?
We had a bit of a unique beginning at Bridget and founding story. A lot of people, business founders and partners, they grow up on the same street, they know each other for 20 years, and this is definitely what venture capitalists are looking for in business partners. We were actually randomly matched up to be on a team as part of the Next Canada, an accelerator program in our fourth year of university where we were both studying at Western. And by complete coincidence, we discovered after being matched up on a team that both of our families had been in the construction industry. And so that was really the beginning of Bridget, a focus on construction, a passion for construction, and then from there going out on site, doing a ton of research and developing our first product, Bridget Fields.
That's very, very cool. So no garage involved, no garage required in this story. And you're not an engineer, you were studying business, is that correct, at Western?
Yeah, I was studying business at the Ivey School, and then Lauren was in civil engineering at Western as well.
That's very cool, very cool. And how did you come to be in Waterloo region? What happened?
We chose to be in Waterloo. So again, no roots, we didn't grow up in Waterloo. I was from Ottawa originally. And when we started the business, we were in Toronto for the first few months. And the first software engineer we actually hired was based in Waterloo. And it came down to this choice where, it was either she was going to move to Toronto or we were going to move to Kitchener. And we looked at really what our lifestyle was going to be in Toronto at the time on that startup budget. And it was a basement apartment that Lauren and I were both going to live in, and that would also be our office space. For twice the money, as each being able to get, our own place to live, being closer to more engineering talent, and having a home, which was Communitech for us in the early days. And so the decision was pretty clear for us that moving to Kitchener-Waterloo would be the best place to start.
At a time that COVID hit, a lot of industries were knocked off their puck. Construction wasn't. What's different about construction?
The construction industry was really fortunate to be deemed an essential industry. And, in Ontario, there was probably a 3-week pause where job sites were shut down. But beyond that, it was just one of the areas that the government felt was really critical to keep the industry moving and keep the economy moving. In addition to being able to work outside, especially in the warmer months, quite easily. That was, those are a couple of the reasons why we were able to keep going. So our business, we were sort of wondering where things were going to land for the first couple of weeks, and then everything was right back to where it had been. And we actually saw a 70% increase in our Bridget Bench product usage.
Tell me about this. This is the new product.
Yeah, so Bridget Bench is for resource planning and construction. So it's our second product that we've launched. We launched in May 2019 and already have about 90 customers on it. So large general contracting firms that are tracking, tens of thousands of their team members to help schedule them onto their projects.
That's very, very cool. So one of the things that's happened in the last 7 months is not just the pandemic. We've seen an increased focus on diversity. Black Lives Matter, but I think a much broader consideration of how do we actually make a difference. Now, Bridget's had a really interesting journey. You've been diverse from the very beginning. You're not, two kind of smelly guys in hoodies. Tell me a bit about your journey and how you've built Bridget to be a different kind of organization.
Yeah, going back to the founding story, it became very obvious that Lauren and I, as business partners selling into two, male-dominated industries, or at the intersection of two male-dominated industries, tech and construction, that we didn't fit the mold. And that was obvious in early fundraising conversations and just conversations with advisors. And so, given that we weren't the norm, I think that likely always allowed us to, look outside of the box when we were trying to grow our team. And so from the early days, because we weren't sort of that standard startup makeup that you would see, we would look to hire from different industries, different educational backgrounds. We had, gender diversity really at our core. And so it didn't really require this thinking of, we're 100 people or we're 500 people. Oh, we should think about diversity now. It was just very much something that was kind of, in our DNA. And so when all of the movements around Black Lives Matter and everything started this summer, we forced ourselves to continue to raise the bar and to review our policies and review how we had been doing things. But it wasn't this massive shift that we had to make in order to sort of correct the way we had been building our team historically.
Did you encounter any challenges along the way?
Early on, we got asked this question a lot, and everyone assumed that it was the construction industry that would present more challenges to growing our business, and we never experienced any sort of bias that we could think of. There was no anecdotes really around that. In the tech space, I think it was more challenging. There's been a ton of studies just around the fact that females get less venture capital, lower valuations, and if you can break past those early days in the pre-seed rounds of investment and get to more the Series A or Series B, then you can actually show the metrics of the business, and it gets a lot easier, I think, to get a fair valuation and the amount of capital you require. In the early days of fundraising, when you don't have those revenue proof points, the investor's just betting on you. And when you don't fit the pattern or fit the mold, I do think it is harder to get investors over the line. So we definitely did experience that.
So what did you do to compensate for that?
There was one really important and critical meeting that we had, and it was with a group of advisors that we had been meeting with in Toronto as part of another accelerator program. And we had been pitching our business, we'd been trying to raise money, and went to them with all of these reasons for why we had been getting no. And there was no theme in the reasons. There was no consistency. One investor would say the market size for construction tech was too small. One investor would say that they didn't feel we had the right background. Another investor would give another reason. And there was no trend, and therefore that made us a little bit suspicious of the feedback. And it was one of the advisors in the room that said, I hate to say this, and I don't really know how to say this, but is it possible it's because you're two females pitching a business in tech to sell to construction? And it hadn't actually occurred to us before, and that I think speaks to the families we were brought up in and the encouraging sort of atmosphere that we had experienced really our entire lives. And it was pretty upsetting because any other problem we had encountered, we could easily come up with a solution in the past. And this was one that we didn't really have a clear solution. We couldn't change the fact that we were women in this industry. And so we left the room and we said, okay, metrics are the only thing we should be focusing on. And if we have traction for the business, then that will be the best way we can put, a strong case for why people should invest in our business. And from that day on, we had, internal sales competitions, and, our company knows that we've been very revenue driven from the beginning, and, possibly to a fault, but it was really because of this, because of this feedback and because of this challenge when it came to fundraising in the very early days.
So you mentioned, how you were brought up. Well, how were you brought up? I mean, was it your parents encouraged you to be an entrepreneur one day, or, what sort of led you to this path where it was just an absolutely normal and legitimate choice for you to say, I'm not going to go and work at that bank. I'm going to join up with Lauren Lake, and we're gonna do a startup.
Looking back on my family history, it's pretty interesting because there are some clear trends, even though no one ever told me to go and start a business. So my great-grandfather started a rebar company in Ottawa. Zagerman Steel. My grandfather had a demolition company that he founded and ran, but my grandmother actually came up with the idea. My grandmother also came up with a business idea for my uncle, a computer recycling business back in the 80s, so it was like very early days. So there was definitely an entrepreneurial sort of comfort in my family. My dad also started a couple businesses, and so it wasn't something that I thought was crazy because there were people in my family that had done it before. And I think the biggest thing was my parents definitely always made sure I felt supported in success or failure. And so I was never really afraid to try something new because I knew that, you know, if it didn't work out, then I would have their support and they would encourage me to go out there and try it again. So I think, you know, I'm really fortunate to have come from a family. I'm very lucky to have come from a family that was able to, you know, keep encouraging me along the way. The other thing outside of my family that I think that helped a lot was just playing sports growing up. So you constantly are used to winning as a team, losing as a team, and, you know, picking yourself back up and trying again. And that I think was really influential growing up as well.
What sports did you play?
All of them. I excelled at none of them, but I played all of them. I rowed, I played rugby, I was on the golf team by default because no one else tried out, so I got to miss, you know, an extra couple days of school.
Career, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Diving, water polo, I did literally all of them. But
it's interesting you should mention that because over your head on the outside of this room, of course, is a giant doodle of one of the times that Patty McCord came to visit us, and of course everyone knows I'm a huge Patty McCord fan. And of course she talks about the importance of team, not families, but teams. She says, you know, the difference with teams is that people do get traded and they do get let go. And you're constantly trying to think about, you know, how do we engineer the greatest group that we can take to this market, to this challenge. And I've always had such success hiring people who have played sport, team sport. Because they really do understand what it takes to support each other and the fact that it's about a group winning, it's not about an individual winning. So love hiring people, former field hockey players, OHL players, really anyone who's played serious team sport because they really do get it.
Yeah, you lose a game and then the next day, like, you're going back to practice no matter what.
That's
you don't
right.
get to just quit or give up. I mean, you could, but it's definitely not encouraged.
And you understand the importance of you know having someone's back, right? And covering off when a mistake is made. So anyway, I'm just a big Patty McCord fan. I actually got to interview her. It was about 4 or 5 months ago on TrueNorthTV, and she was amazing, as she's always amazing. So you've been revenue driven, which is the new way of calling ourselves bootstrapped. Early on, you started taking some investments, but you were mentioning the fact that you were very focused on sales and driving revenue. You just recently entered into an agreement with Autodesk. Can you tell us a bit about this Autodesk thing?
Yeah, so Autodesk recently invested. So it was a $9.25 million round that just happened this past July, and they were the lead investor. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, where did that come from? Like, you know, how long have you been talking to them? And it actually was a conversation that had been ongoing for about 5 years, which is interesting. So we had, you know, built a relationship with Autodesk over many years, and our first product, Bridgit Field, was always, you know, a bit competitive with one of their product offerings. And by launching Bench, we had, you know, all of a sudden a more complementary solution to their overall suite. But they also have been acquiring a number of companies, and one of the companies that they acquired was called Building Connected, and I had met that CEO and co-founder 5 years ago when he was operating out of a basement in San Francisco, and we just kept touch as, you know, peers in the industry. And when I met with him after his acquisition, I was telling him about our new product, and he said, resource planning and construction, like, this is something I've been wanting to do, and we just, you know, can never find the time to get it done. I love this problem that you're going after. And he reintroduced us to the Autodesk team, and it sort of continued on from there. So we're really excited that they're so passionate about the problem that we're solving, and it's been a great partnership to date.
Yeah, and they're such a great organization, such a great brand. So congratulations on that. What's the big plan for Bridget? How far is this going to go? How big is this going to be?
Yeah, so we have some pretty big growth ambitions next year. I think with the partnership that we've built with Autodesk, we're also partners with Procore, who's another large player in the construction tech industry. It's given us so much more exposure to the broader North American market. So really, we're just trying to accelerate sales. We'll be growing our product and engineering team quite significantly. And for us, we're the first resource planning product in the construction industry. And so far, we've been focused on general contractors, but we're looking to really maintain that position and grow to new segments within the construction industry.
I think one of the things that I've noticed after having been here for almost 18 years is how quickly things can change. And I think, for us, as we were thinking about the ecosystem and the industry in Canada, and how do we support greater participation by underrepresented groups, specifically starting with women through our Fierce Founders programs. And then all of a sudden, it's normalized and it's legitimate and it changes. I mean, for us, it went from within literally 18 months, it went from about 8% of our companies going through our intake process being female founders to over 35%. And on a path to getting to 50% at some point in time, but it's still early. What message would you have for other young women who are thinking about entrepreneurialism as a career choice, as a legitimate career choice?
I think when you see others do it before you, it's a lot more comfortable, and so we very much.
Who did you see?
I think my grandmother, even though she never was running the business, because just the time she grew up, that wouldn't have been very common. But she was the mastermind behind the scenes that allowed multiple men in her life, ultimately her son, her husband, to get these businesses off the ground. And so I think it wasn't through, I don't think it was through seeing her run a business or operate a business, but just seeing the way her mind worked and seeing her being able to pick out opportunities along the way, to me, was really inspiring. And I always knew that, if she had grown up in a different time, she would have been a CEO and she would have started a company. In her later years, she actually was shopping for a new desk with my dad, and she sat down at a desk with a big sort of, your standard office chair, and then she smacked her fist on the table and said, "I want to be a boss." And so I think it was very much within her, and it inspired me. So I think that makes it a lot easier for women to start businesses when they do see someone that they look up to that has run a business. But I think the message that we always try and say is also, don't be afraid to be the first, because there wasn't really, one female operating a business in construction and tech that was the perfect role model for us, and we had to be one of the first to go out and do that, and really carve our own path. So as much as mentors are great, and I think you should look for them, I think the biggest message is just don't be afraid to be the first and push through.
When you think about some of the great founders in Canada or Waterloo region or sort of anywhere, female founders, who do you look to and say, gosh, they're crushing it?
Carol Lehman. I obviously didn't know her when I started Bridget, but have gotten to know her throughout my time in Waterloo. And I think, she has just done a phenomenal job at growing Exonify, and has had, a lot of business success before Exonify. And she's definitely someone that, I very much aspire to be when I've had a bit more business experience under my belt. But yeah, she's been great, and she provides, lots of feedback to lots of folks in the industry, including Bridget.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So one of the things, of course, that's happened during the pandemic is that, we're not working from home. We've been forced home in the middle of a pandemic. And for a lot of people, they have not only the responsibility of the job, but they're caring for elderly parents, young children, a whole host of demands. How have you helped your team manage those differences? And it's actually interesting because I was speaking to somebody just the other day, and we were talking about the fact that treating people equally doesn't mean treating people exactly the same, because different people have got different bandwidth, different constraints in their lives. So how have you helped your team manage these additional demands that they have on their time that are creating a lot of anxiety and issues for people?
We've had a few policies in place actually for a while that I think ended up supporting the new work from home environment quite well. So we had flex work more generally. So, within reason, you could come in and leave when best suited your schedule. So maybe you had, a child's pickup or something like that, and there was never an issue in terms of leaving early. And if you had to catch up on something later, great, we were flexible with that. We always also had 4-hour Fridays. So they're not half-day Fridays, but they're 4-hour Fridays. And so that was another way that, team members could take a bit of time off, get, their errands for the weekend ready so they could actually spend their weekend with their family, or doing whatever it was that was going to allow them to unwind before starting the work week again on Monday, and then an open vacation policy. So we had a few different things that I think really allowed our team to transition quite smoothly because they already were comfortable working, different hours that were convenient for them. So we have a number of team members that, maybe they have 3 kids at home, and it's basically impossible to focus for very extended periods of time when you have 3 little ones sort of tapping you every few minutes. And we've just sort of set the expectation that that's okay, and we know everyone's doing their best. And if we can accommodate certain team members to come into the office certain days a week, then we're happy to do that, as long as it's sort of a safe number of people. And just trying to listen to what some of the actual challenges are versus assume that whatever, my situation is or Lauren's situation is the same as all of our team members.
The name Bridget, where did the name Bridget come from?
The name Bridget was developed actually the very first night that Lauren and I met. So we became business partners, incorporated the company, and came up with the name all in one night. Pretty productive evening, more productive than most. And it was the fact that we knew that construction was maybe not as open to new technology, or at least there was that perception. And so rather than some scary software name, we really wanted to humanize it on day one. And then Bridget is just sort of tying to the communication element, the collaboration element. And I think Lauren was actually working on a bridge design project at the time, so bridges were just on the mind. So it was those 3 factors that really combined. And a few folks said they hated it, but then when we went out to the field, a lot of customers just loved it. They were like, Bridget saves the day. Bridget really helped me out today. And so they liked actually saying the company name.
Mallorie Brodie, thank you so much for spending time with me today, and all the best with Bridget in the future.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you all very much for joining us here today for TrueNorthTV, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week at noon on Tuesday. Have a great day.
Missed an episode? Watch them on demand at TrueNorthWaterloo.com or subscribe to Communitech's YouTube channel.